Hello and welcome to Coast AM's official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course, on coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Let me tell you a little bit about our special guest tonight. Fresh out of high school, Craig Campobasso found himself working behind the scenes for 4 years on the epic feature film Dune. The father and daughter producing team, Dino and Rafaela de Laurentiis, and director David Lynch, were Craig's first mentors into the business of filmmaking. Rafaela later hired him as a caster and director on the very popular Christmas movie you might remember, Prancer, starring Sam Elliott. And then he apprenticed as a casting associate on Steven Spielberg's television show Amazing Stories for NBC. But beyond being a casting director, which is what he also still does, he's a noted author and has done his own film, of course, called Stranger at the Pentagon, and we're going to talk a lot about his work today. Craig Campobasso on Coast to Coast. Craig, I'm looking forward to this. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. So, thank you so much for having me on, George. I really appreciate it. I've been really looking forward to it.
This is something. I mean, the work you've been doing is so widespread. It's amazing. I mean, the casting, directing, the writing, the film producing and directing as well.
Yeah.
What got you really into all this? What happened?
Do you know, I've always been interested in the entertainment business. I've been in it since I was 15, so I don't know any other craft. But I had a spiritual awakening when I was 26. It was right when I finished Spielberg's Amazing Stories after the second season. And, and I, all of a sudden, I just wanted to learn about all things universal. And that's sort of what catapulted me into, higher consciousness and all of that. And, and of course, studying throughout the years and working on myself spiritually, and doing that, being a part of the business, as we all know, which is a very hard thing to do in this business. Got to the point where I thought, wouldn't it be great to just start incorporating these ideas and thoughts and higher evolution into filmmaking and, getting it out there into the public.
I want to get into your work, especially the film that I saw that I had an incredible time to introduce you at that event in Laughlin, of course.
Yeah.
On the just staggering film, Stranger at the Pentagon, with an incredible story here that you investigated based on Frank Strange's and
right.
Frank's work. But as a casting director, when you do that, do you bring the people to the director and say, "Hey, this is the one I want for this role"? How does that work?
Well, it depends on the director. If they're a new up and coming director or one who's won many awards in for short films, like David Lynch, for instance, got catapulted because of his AFI film Eraserhead. And Mel Brooks noticed his uniqueness in this black and white film, and that's why he hired him for Elephant Man. So when working with various levels of directors, what I do is I actually sit down with them. I go over all the roles. I go over the budget with the producers to see exactly how much we have for each of the roles, including the leads. And, so it's a lot of investigative work within all the agencies. I have one agent that represents me in the project. So they actually read the script, and we go over ideas together for our price range, or there may be, some actors who are looking to do something a little different or unique. Like, for instance, back when Jim Carrey was doing tons of comedies, he really wanted to do a drama, so he would drop his price for a drama. So
he only took $10 million instead of 20, right?
Instead of 20, correct. So but really, what it is, is reading a bunch of new actors, bringing in seasoned actors, and sort of mixing it all up. and bringing that into the director. And in television, it's the producers who actually pick. The last big TV show I did was David Kelly's Picket Fences. So it's bringing in choices, bringing in cool and different ideas. A kids film I like taking obscure people that you don't normally see in film and injecting them in there. Over the years, I pulled people like Lou Rawls out of obscurity to play a priest in a movie because you never expect to see Lou Rawls in a movie. And last year, I actually, by the grace of God, it worked. Is I got Mary Wilson from the Supremes in between 3 days she had off on her tour and flew her to do a day part, which she was so excited to do. And I even got Montel Williams to come and be in that same film. So, so it's kind of fun, to see. Because, when you see films, you want to see different people and go, wow, Mary Wilson, she's 70 years old. She looks like she's 50.
That's fantastic. And you've cast our buddy Robert Davi in a film.
Robert Davi, I love Davi so much. I've cast him many times over the years, and he is just, my casting partner for years was Joy Todd. She's since passed, and her and I have always been major fans of Mr. Davi. And what a singer, too, man.
He sings Sinatra, and he's phenomenal, surprisingly so.
Yeah.
I went and saw him sing in Vegas. He headlined for Rickles.
Yeah.
And, he is exceptional. When I first met him, Craig, we were at a restaurant, and he's looking at me because he listens to the show, and I'm looking at him because I've seen him on so many films, but he's got that face, but not everybody knows his name.
Right.
And we went up to each other and introduced each other, and I told him, I says, everyone knows your face, everyone, and people listening, just Google Robert Davi, D-A-V-I. He's been on the show before. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But not everybody knows your name. And he says, you're absolutely right. I mean, he comes into a room and everybody points at him, but not everybody knows his name. But he's happy like that. He's got that secondary actor ability. Of course, he played a great role in a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
He played that Sanchez guy. And just a superhuman being. But you're right. He sings like Sinatra, and he gets great reviews, doesn't he?
He gets great reviews. And, a lot of times he plays the bad guy, but, he plays a really good guy, too. So... I've hired him in, different things, I don't know what it is, but, everybody loves him. I was, many years ago, well, not many, maybe 5-6 years ago, I was having dinner with Sylvia Brown in Las Vegas after one of her shows. And she said, I know you know Davi. I love him. Can you call him so I can say hi? So I called him and I said, do you know who Sylvia Brown is? And he says, yeah. So I actually put them on the phone and they had a lovely conversation.
Oh, Sylvia Brown. God rest her soul. Huh?
Yes, we do miss her. We do miss her.
Boy, she was one of a kind, let me tell you. Hey, stay with us. We're going to come back in a moment, Craig, and talk about your film, The Stranger at the Pentagon. This is an incredible story based on the book by Dr. Frank Stranges, the late Frank Stranges. We'll be back. Well, if you're a Coast Insider, Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Pacific time, you can chat with the trends expert, Gerald Celente. He's going to be our special guest. You'll have some fun, and that room fills up awfully fast, so jump on board. And welcome back to Coast with Craig Campobasso, and we're talking about Craig's incredible work. His websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com, by the way. And years ago, Craig, we did have Dr. Frank Stranges on as a guest. And to people who may not remember him, he was the president of the National Investigations Committee on UFOs. He was an author. He had degrees in theology, psychology, criminology. He was affiliated with a number of law enforcement and scientific organizations. Craig, he was the real deal.
Another thing people don't realize is he actually was a marshal.
Yes.
And when I traveled with him, when we would check in and he would show his marshal badge,
He's proud of that.
I mean, they just whisked us right on and did everything. He had the power to stop people, and then he would call the local police, and they would come and that kind of thing. I mean, he had many criminals over the years, and I told him, I said, I get worried about you stopping people, because he had the car light and the whole thing.
Yeah.
So,
he was proud of that.
He was very proud of that. He was very, very proud of that. And, he also counseled police officers and all kinds of really nice things. And, and of course, he lectured on this subject his entire life.
And he loved UFOs. He loved it, Craig, with a passion. And one of his books was called Stranger at the Pentagon, which you turned into a short film. Tell us a little bit about the story, the Frank Stranger story. And did he make it up? Was it fiction? What was it?
Well, the story goes is he met Valiant Thor in December of 1959, and he was doing a 2-week lecture in Washington, D.C., and one particular evening he was doing UFOs and the Bible. And he, at that time, he had a book called Flying Saucerama, and which was a lot of UFO stories and photographs, which were also provided to him by August Roberts, who was a UFO researcher and a retired Air Force photographer. Anyway, this woman approached him when he was signing books and said that that she had to talk to him. When she showed her Pentagon badge, they went into the back room, and she said that Valiant Thor wanted to meet with him. But I have to actually back up. The photographs that were taken of Valiant Thor were done sometime earlier by August Roberts.
Sure. And explain who Valiant Thor is.
Valiant Thor is a created being who came here with a message of peace and goodwill, but came with a divine design, which was to help eliminate sickness, disease, poverty, and to show people how to prolong their lives. And he met with Eisenhower on March 16th, 1957. Eisenhower felt such peace and goodwill from this man that he put him on a VIP status for 3 years, where he lived at the Pentagon, where they would work out this proposal to possibly implement throughout the United States, and then, when proven successful, implement it and share it with the rest of the world. So, that part of the story is, that's fascinating in itself, right?
All by itself. And where did Valiant Thor come from? What system? What planetary system?
He came from Dr. Frank said he came from the planet Venus. And, of course, everybody says, well, how can you live on Venus? Because there's, it's gaseous and all of that. Dr. Frank also explained that they all live on the interiors of planets because they are able to hold a resonance field. So if you imagine a planet and then you can terrace it into floors like a spaceship, and that they have technologies where they can make an outdoor setting with what they call a synchrotron sky. So a synchrotron sky would be a sky that turns from day to night that still looks infinite. But in these resonation fields, this is what keeps them looking young because, us who are living on the outside of a planet, we get all of the, the universal garbage coming in, and that's what ages us, and the gravity and all that kind of stuff. So
1951, Craig, the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still came out with actor Michael Rennie. Gosh, I would have loved you casting that movie had you been around.
I would have loved that. I almost cast a film for Robert Wise, the director, in his later days. But interesting story. Do you know who Intel Officer Major George Filer is?
Yes.
Yes. So George Filer of the Filer Files. George actually met Michael Rennie on an airplane, and Michael Rennie told him that our government helped to assist in the making of that film, also financially.
Really?
To get a gauge on what the world would think if somebody from another world came here in human form.
That's an amazing story.
And then it's interesting that Valiant Thor shows up in 1957. So, yes, because Day the Earth Stood Still was released in 1951. So, isn't that an interesting sort of
it really
aspect
is.
there? Yeah.
So back to Strangeness. He finds out about Valiant Thor, and pick up the story from there, Craig.
Sure. So, just to back up to give you a little bit, is August Roberts, the photographer, retired Air Force photographer, was at a UFO lecture in Howard Menger's backyard, and Howard Menger was a big contactee back in those days as well. And he saw these three beings out there sitting, in the backyard that he just felt were not from here. So he kept photographing them and took lots of photographs. He immediately called Dr. Frank after that and said, that he had photographs of what he believed were space people. And so he went and saw him the next day, and Dr. Frank asked him, why do you think that they were space people? And he said, that man right there, pointing to the Valiant Thor photograph. By the way, the photographs are on strangeratthepentagon.com if anybody's never seen them, and they're also in the book Stranger at the Pentagon. But he said that he had no fingerprints or palm prints when he spoke, and that there was you just knew that they were from somewhere different. They just had this energy about them. Dr. Frank actually connected me to Connie Menger, Howard's wife. Howard was at the time in the beginning stages or middle stages, I believe, of Alzheimer's. So anyway, she told me that that every time they held these UFO lectures, that the visitors were always there. Sometimes they let them know who they were, and sometimes they didn't. She said that Valiant Thor and the other two did not let them know, but they also thought that they were special. And and then she made a joke, which I still love to this day. She says, we thought that they were so beautiful they must be show people from New York.
I love it. And this was during an era, though, Craig. This was during an era in the 50s and the early 60s where people were just crazy about UFOs. I mean, the media seemed to handle it even in a more diplomatic way.
Yes, and there was all kinds of contact, and you have to remember back then all the contact was humans. It was all human. There were no grays. There was nothing like that back in those days. So, and it was all human contact about these beings coming to share a higher evolution about the meaning of life, and. Anyway, the just to sort of marry those two stories together is so Dr. Frank blew up this picture of Valiant Thor, and when he gave his lectures, at the end he would talk and say, and this is supposedly a man from another planet. He didn't know his name. He didn't know who he was, but but if you really look at the photograph, he is perfect. The symmetry of his face and features and everything is an absolute perfect perfection. So anyway, so the woman from the Pentagon, when she came, she was a high-level clearance secretary. And she actually pointed to the photograph and said, he wants to meet with you. So she brought him to the Pentagon the next day, Dr. Frank had spoke with him. She took him into just a regular office.
Yeah.
And where they spoke, he wasn't wearing his spacesuit. He was wearing a suit and tie, but he had the spacesuit for Dr. Frank to examine and look at, and how light it was, even with the boots. And he had explained to him that that the government had tried everything. They tried a diamond drill. They tried a maser. They didn't have lasers then. They poured acid on it, and it was completely impenetrable. So,
did he leave a craft here, Craig, or did they just drop him off and they took off?
They dropped him off and then they took off, but he was able to come and go as he pleased. Which he did, which Dr. Frank said. But he primarily was there. I mean, what I myself, the questions that I always had, and Dr. Frank didn't have the answers to this, is, what else happened, during that time. I mean, we know that the powers that be were trying to get his space technology. They were trying to get all of those kinds of things. Eisenhower and Nixon were actually for his proposal and championed him. So that's where the conflict lied, was there, and then with the Joint Chiefs and the rest of the military brass. So. So there was 3 years. They ended up ultimately turning down the proposal, saying that it would, put doctors, nurses, pharmaceutical companies out of business, and it would completely collapse the economy. So you can only imagine if it was implemented, and actually, if we actually knew what it was. I tried to find out exactly. What was in that proposal. Dr. Frank didn't know, and it was never shared with him. And I said, well, didn't you ever ask? And he said, Valiant Thor is a man who had a very high job in overseeing the Earth and its progression. And supposedly he is still here at the time of Dr. Frank's death. He said that he was here for the long run. Which I just found quite interesting, because all we do is we just hear of all these negative stories. And,
You're right. You're right.
All of that, and to actually hear something of a positive note, I just thought, wouldn't it be great to actually tell this story through film? Now, that all came about. It wasn't that I set out to actually make it. It all sort of happened through happenstance. I met Dr. Frank through some friends who were friends with my casting partner, and I thought it was just going to be a sweet little fan lunch, and because I read his book in the 80s, and long story short, we became quite close really quick, sort of like father and son, and he said many people had tried to make it into a movie over the years and failed, and then somebody, after I knew him for maybe several months, a gentleman called and wanted to make the film into a movie. He said, since you're in the business, would you come with me? Because I really don't know about these things. And I said, sure. So I went and I checked the guy out. He didn't, have any producing credentials or anything like that. And when I asked him to produce, a resume and, everything, he said that he only did business on a handshake. And I said, okay, well, you're not going to do business with Dr. Frank. So I had to sort of break the news to him. Yeah. And, and I actually saw a tear fall from Dr. Frank's face.
Yeah, he wanted this done, didn't he?
He really wanted it done. And I told him, I said, Stranger of the Pentagon really is a book about vignettes of things that happened over the years. There's not really a main storyline, but... So we actually sat down and for a couple of years, and he just told me all of his adventures, with the crew members and, visiting Victor 1 over all the years and sharing all the stories with me. And, and I started to sort of put something together. And that's how it all came about, and when he... when he passed away, I just sort of shelved it. And, these days movies are made by short films or sizzle reels. And I was one of the casting directors on Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow with Jude Law and Angelina Jolie and Gwyneth Paltrow. That film actually was a short film that got the private financing, which was about $60 million. So it was an independent film, right? And then after the film was made, it got sold into distribution through Paramount. I've also done films for one of the producers of the Saw movies, and she is the one who gave James Wan and Lee Wynell $25,000 to go and make a short film about Saw, and the rest is history. You know?
Okay.
So that's why I decided to do the same thing and enlisted, everybody in the business to come on board and help us. So
good for you, because the movie is a drama based on what we think is a real episode.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And I had all the all the guidance from Dr. Frank and all of that. And the interesting thing about the note part, when I had the first draft done, I did give it to Dr. Frank, and he said he was going to give it to Valiant Thor. And I didn't hear anything for a while, and then he called me and he said, he came and he was holding it. He said he doesn't read, he just absorbs it. and he said, I said, well, were there any notes? And he said, well, he said just to tell you good job. And I said, that's it? So,
I guess that's all you needed.
And no, but the next morning when I woke up, there were notes swimming in my head like the rings of Saturn, and I had to jump on the computer and get it all out. And that's how the process went until a day came where he said, tell him this one will fly.
I love it. Craig, stay with us. We're going to come back. I want to talk more about the incredible film Stranger at the Pentagon and find out exactly why did those Joint Chiefs of Staff simply say, no, we're not going to do that? Because, as you mentioned, pharmaceutical companies would lose money, something we've always suspected about why we don't have those special cures, why those things don't happen. We'll come back and take your calls as well. Questions with Craig Campobasso about Hollywood or about this film. We'll be back.
Thank you for listening to Coast AM on our official YouTube channel. I'm your host, George Norrie, and don't forget to visit the Coast Insider membership area on coasttocoastam.com, where you can access our past, upcoming, and classic shows.